Hello everybody and welcome to this special review for Dragon's Dogma 2. Me and Dan have had the game for about a week now. We've played 25 plus hours each and we've a lot to talk about. Now obviously there's going to be completely spoiler free, and of course thank you to Capcom for giving us the codes. I've personally had a great time playing this game so far. I'm not really a big fan of the original though, for many reasons that we might get into later. But Dan, how was your, give me your 40 foot. What are your thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2?
Oh, you want first thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2 or on Dark Arisen / the original?
Give me a little bit about Dark Arisen and then Dragon's Dogma 2.
Okay, so originally the first time I played it, I didn't really fully get it. So I put it down and came back a few years later after I got really big into Monster Hunter, more of Capcom's action games. And then I found it really refreshing, and it sort of led nicely and tidy into my impressions of Dragon's Dogma 2, where I kind of knew what to expect. But going back to Dark Arisen now, it's insane how unaccessible that particular first game is and how rough that is in that particular sense, because it gets a while to get there, to get to a point where you really get to enjoy that game for what it really is. And that's sort of the problem back then with games of that era of Capcom. Their action games have this really harsh startup where you kind of have to move yourself through it and then you get to the good part. And I think they got really better at that the last couple of years, particularly if you look at how they do Monster Hunter games now and how they do the overall lineup of games. I think they do better, a lot quicker to the meat and potatoes of what a game is actually like and what makes a game actually good. And I feel that immediately happened with me with Dragon's Dogma 2. Obviously, the tutorial feels more streamlined and you get more of an invitation to what you exactly want to be. But outside of that, once you get to the first town, it's okay, you got this, have fun, man.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, that I really don't like Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. I've played it, I tried to play it on the PS4 when it came out, I tried to play it on Steam, and I've dabbled in it on the Switch. And recently I've played 16 hours of it, and I just put it down because it's after 15, 16 hours, you get to the main city in Dark Arisen, Grand Soren, I think is the name of it.
Yep.
And it just feels aimless, but in a bad sense, and it just feels like I'm walking from Grand Soren to this location, walking back, going back to the same location, and it just takes too long to get into it. And I think going into Dragon's Dogma 2, intellectually, I love what Dragon's Dogma is. I love this sort of meaty RPG with big enemies to fight, with loads of different classes, with some cool abilities and upgrades, and it just seems like a game that is made for me. But with Dark Arisen, I just couldn't get into it. And with Dragon's Dogma 2, it takes, maybe 30, 40 minutes before you're into it. And then once you're into it, they're just there you go. And I just love when games trust the player's intellect. And they're just okay, here you go. Here's your quest. Here's your class. Here's your main pawn. Go explore.
I think that's the good thing, right? But even with that short lead-up time to when you get to go out into the world, it's still a power fantasy without any real modern convenience. Because one thing that I hate about RPGs now is that they basically bombard you with teleportation points. They don't really let you explore the world a bit. Dragon's Dogma 2 is you have port crystals which you can put down, and then you can use what's called fairy stones to go back.
Yep.
But outside of that, and the ox carts, which you then move around a little bit more, you are kind of stuck in a hard place because you basically have to figure it out on your own, which is sort of difficult sometimes because this world really, and once again, it's not me being mean or saying as a bad thing, you are basically aimless. You are basically trying to find your place in this world and trying to figure out what you need to go, where you want to be. And it doesn't really help. There's a million distractions around you always at every given time.
Yeah, I think how this game approaches exploration and how it gives you quests is honestly probably my favorite part, because how many times have you been in this situation, Dan, where you've walked into a new town in an RPG and you look on your map and there's 40 exclamation points. There's 12 NPCs looking to talk to you. There's a guild over here that you need to go to. But how this game gives you quests is just absolutely fantastic. You walk into a town, and on your map, it'll show you where the inn is, where the vocation guild is, like a couple of things like that. But all of the quests are given to you organically, and you can miss out on them. Like, there might be an NPC that maybe looks like, oh, he might have a quest for me, so I'll go talk to him. And sometimes they will have a quest. And other times you'll be walking down the main street of a town, and a random NPC will run up to you. It's like, oh my god, my brother, he went out looking for herbs or something like that. And one really cool thing that this game does is that there's a specific quest, like a specific side quest at the start where it's like, oh, my brother, he's gone and he's gone to collect herbs. But the game gives you a little tooltip, and it basically explains that this is a timed quest. This guy is actually out in the forest, and if you don't do this quest within, say, however many hours, the whatever's attacking him, the goblins or the wolves, will kill him, and then you won't be able to complete the quest. And I just love that because I never once felt overwhelmed by this game.
So I didn't do that quest.
Oh.
So I got the introduction to it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to go off in that direction. I'm not doing this. So then I went back to check, and he was most certainly dead.
Yeah, it's just it's refreshing. That's what it is. And I think Dark Arisen still gave you that, but there was so much stuff that you had to like claw at to get the good parts. That's what kind of annoyed me about it.
Yeah, it was a game with rougher edges overall, and you kind of needed to accept that to get like really into it. And some people really did, and I was sort of halfway on it. But I think this game makes that entire line of succession and going from one point A to point B far more accessible in so many multitude of ways.
Yep. It makes it just accessible enough that it doesn't feel like it's getting in your way, but also not overly accessible that it kind of feels like it's holding your hand, because you're still just thrown out into the world. And you touched on it earlier, the ox carts, which are basically this game's way of fast travel without fast travel, because those ferry stones that you use to fast travel are really rare, so you kind of have to use them like very sparingly. But in between towns there's ox carts, which are massive oxes pulling carts, as you can imagine. And in any other game you could click on that ox cart and say you want to go to any town, but instead in this game it's like, this ox cart is going to one town and that's it. And then it's like you kind of have to plot your journey, and when you're on the ox carts you can doze off and you can like complete the journey really fast. Or if you want to just sit there and just take in the scenes, you can just sit there on the back of the ox cart and just look around, and eventually, more than likely, your ox cart will be attacked, and it'll be attacked by bandits or goblins, and then you have to defend the ox cart. At one time, Dan, I was fighting a load of zombies or something in after being attacked on an ox cart, and I was the big two-handed warrior, and I did a big massive swing and I hit the ox cart and I broke it. And it plopped me like halfway between my destination, and it was really dark. I couldn't see a thing. That's another thing. The darkness in this game is actually dark.
Did you at least have lantern equipment with you?
Oh yes, I had a lantern, but even still, like when you're out in the open world and it's nighttime and you have your lantern on, you can, no joke, only see what? 2-3 meters in front of you, maybe. And like there's been a couple of times where I was like walking, having a great time at nighttime, and then I was like, oh no, there's a cliff, and I nearly fall off it.
But you know, that makes this game also fun. It's fun to fail.
Yes, it is.
It's always good in the game to succeed no matter what, obviously. But sometimes it feels punishing to fail in a game. I don't think it's punishing at all in this game. I just think it's fun.
Yep, because
there's so many like weird circumstances, like you can get randomly attacked by one of the dragons or just by the goblin horde that just overwhelms you. Like very early on, the goblin horde can easily overwhelm you if you don't know what you're doing. And I just sit there and laugh for half a minute and like, okay, let's now carry on. Let's see where we need to go. Yeah.
It's like I do think this is like one of them water cooler games, if you want to put it in, where people are going to be having conversations. Like there was one time I was fighting a big troll or an ogre on the side of a mountain, and he picked me up and just threw me off the mountain, and that was me dead. And I just laughed. And then another time I was fighting a griffin, where the griffin flew up into the air. I think my archer or something hit one of his wings and he fell into the water and died. And I just instantly killed a griffin like that. And there's just them moments that are just so cool because every other encounter with a griffin felt like a battle. Like he has 6 full health bars and he's picking up my party members and throwing them away, and he's blowing us all over with his wings. And then that one time it was like, haha, I'm better than you. You fell off a cliff.
Yeah, early on, I just wanted to attack a griffin at its nest, just for funsies. I used most of my inventory, which was not the best call I could have made.
Yep.
In another instance, I was just instantly killed by a griffin who just dropped me off. It's like, yeah, okay, that happens.
Yeah, I think there was one other cool moment that I specifically wrote down. One time I was climbing a mountain. And at the top of the mountain, I saw a stone golem or golem, whatever way you want to pronounce that word. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I don't think I fought one of them. I think I might go up. So I was slowly making my way up the mountain. And then next of all, a griffin flies in and starts fighting the stone golem. And I actually just sat there and I was watching it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in a National Geographic documentary here, just watching these two beasts fight each other. And eventually, the stone golem beat the griffin. He didn't kill him, but he did enough damage to the griffin that he flew off because he was like, I think I'll lose this battle. And I actually think, now that I think about it, I think it was that stone golem, not an ogre, that threw me off a mountain. Yeah.
So so basically the stone golem turned on just like, hey, what are you doing there?
Yeah. And then he absolutely destroyed me. So I think obviously we'd have to talk a bit about the vocations because they're one of the better portions of this game. So for anybody that doesn't know, when you create a character, first of all, the character creator, Dan, one of the best, or if not the best I've ever seen. I kind of accurately made myself. I did it on a stream, and I was there on the stream like this because I think my nose is my defining feature. So I was there on the stream looking at my nose in the camera like this, trying to perfectly sculpt it. And I think I did a pretty decent job. Now, I think my character looks more like, if anyone is a football fan, looks like Kostas Tsimikas, the left back who plays for Liverpool. Because I think we've a similar looking face, kind of. And so he kind of looks a bit more like him, but, you know, pretty accurate. But the vocations, anyway, we'll move on. Yeah. So the vocations, you have a sword and board warrior, you have a two-handed warrior, I forget the exact names, you have a thief, which is 2 daggers, and then you have the archer, and a mage. Yes? Yes, mage. Actually, yeah, no, you can't do the two-handed warrior at the start. You can only do the sword and board.
Two-handed warrior is like later on,
Yeah. So, and I just love how each of these feel completely different. And another thing that I think is fantastic is that you can swap in and out of these at any time. So it's not going to be a game that, I mean, there's loads of replayability there if you do want to like start a new save. But if you want to just experience the classes, there's no real detriment to it. It's not like in other RPGs where, oh, I want to build towards being a sword and board warrior. So I'm going to put all of my resources into upgrade my armor for this and upgrade my weapons for this. It's not punishing in that way. It's very free
it's
and
not locked
open.
In at all.
Yeah.
No.
And as you go along, you unlock more vocations, as in you start with the sword and board warrior, and then eventually you unlock the two-handed warrior, and then you start with a mage, and then you unlock a wizard. And then there's other things like magic archers and tricksters, and there's just so much expression in all of these classes. And one thing that I need to point out before I pass this over to Dan is the sword and board warrior. Now, this was in the original, but I just love doing it. He has this ability called springboard, where I take my shield, I lean back, and if I'm fighting an ogre, I call over one of my pawns, he jumps on my shield, and I launch them up to the ogre. And every single time I did that, I just love it. So Dan, what is your favorite vocation? Just talk about vocations.
Early on, I did a lot of thief. Honestly, it's also sort of a Monster Hunter thing where I also use like the dual-bladed warrior always. I just like the speed of when Capcom throws those into a game, because you can easily just shift walk and also just instantly attack from the back and just move around. Particularly on with the goblins with the shield in front of them, you can easily just go to their back and instantly attack them, which makes that way more satisfying. Like early on. Obviously, later on, like it becomes diminishing returns because of how strong enemies become. But for early game, like that's usually my go-to. As the game progressed, I felt I was more inclined to use Magic Archer. Because the ricochet shots are so much fun
Yep.
to play around
I
with.
love them in the original.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, because I was just in a cave attacking. I don't know, forgot who I was attacking, but like obviously I was like just shooting there and just moved around constantly. And that was really fun, but also like moving the ice to basically put enemies in their place, or in a Griffin situation, I like to use like the fire shot. So there's a lot of interesting mechanics with the Magic Archer that I really gel with.
Yeah, I think the combat system is quite interactive, like in how you can bring the environment into things. Like you can douse an enemy in water and then use lightning magic, or you can douse them in oil and use fire magic. And that's one thing that I haven't fully explored yet, because I have been a warrior. Like I was the sword and board warrior, and now I'm the two-handed guy.
Sure,
So I haven't really engaged with the elements. So I think on a second playthrough or later on in my playthrough, I want to change to a mage. Even though I usually don't really like mages, I just find it very fun being able to. I love when games give you that, when the combat can interact with the environment, and it's almost, I think you can draw some parallels with this game and sort of Breath of the Wild, that like just get thrown into a world and you'll randomly find a cave, and in that cave, you might just find a little item, maybe a new weapon, but you could also find like a griffin, or what are they called? What's the snake? The snake, lion and goat. What are they? What is the name of them? I can't think of them. It's like it's a mythical creature anyway. You might find one of them, or a troll or something. And I just love how the game approaches that. And then, of course, the pawn system. This is a system.
Before we move on to the pawn system, I need to bring up one more thing when it comes to the vocations. And I'm going to ask you directly your opinion on this, because my opinion was already clear before we started talking. Tell me about the trickster. What do you think of it?
Nah, the trickster. The trickster, isn't it? So, the trickster is a vocation that you have to find.
Yeah.
And it was one that was in the pre-release coverage that was like, oh my god, this looks really cool. But then when you get the trickster, you're just like, you have this like lantern in your hand where you're throwing smoke around. And the whole thing about
illusions and upgrading your pawns and stuff.
Yeah, like the whole thing about the trickster is you are a support character. I'm almost certain I didn't level up the trickster past like level 4 because it just wasn't fun. I don't really think there's a way that you can properly attack. You're just like summoning a almost ghost slash fog version of yourself, and then you can like lure all the enemies to him, and then you're like buffing your party and debuffing the others. And it's, I don't know, it feels like a character that would work really well if this had multiplayer, but it doesn't have multiplayer, so therefore it kind of feels almost a bit useless, because while I think the AI for the pawns is good, you don't have enough control over them where I think a support character works well.
I mean, it goes back to my comment of earlier of this being a power fantasy, right? Like you being like this being that just can explore and do whatever they like. This kind of ruins that.
Yep.
Straight up. Because you're basically just sitting back to see what the other pawns and the enemies are doing.
Yeah.
And that's not fun. That's not power fantasy. That's just you sitting there and doing nothing. And Trickster, I get in theory what they were going for. Like this very invocation heavy character. But it's not fun to play as. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, I think it was, because that was the one that everyone was talking about beforehand, and when I figured out how to get it and I got it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be so fun. I was like,
yeah,
this is a bit of a shame.
I was real disappointed by it. Yeah.
And there's still loads of vocations. Like neither of us have. I said it at the start. We played like 25 hours. Neither of us have beaten the game. There's still loads of vocations that I haven't seen or unlocked. So even with the trickster being kind of underwhelming, there's still. I think I still have 5 vocations that I haven't even used yet. So there's regardless, there's still going to be loads there. But of course, the pawn system, it returns. And going back and playing Dragon's Dogma now, you're like, oh my god, the original pawn system is like really, really impressive. And I genuinely love this system. So like you create your character, you create your main pawn, and then you can summon 2 other pawns that you can either find in rifts Or you can just find them exploring the world, which is what I did. Like, you're just walking down, and there's like a warrior, and he's like, oh, I'm really good at finding stuff. Let me join your party. And some of the people that you see are just insane. Like, I came up, I saw Kratos. Some person made Kratos, and he had a big two-handed sword. I had him in my party for ages. Another time I had this man who was in a pair of underwear, and he had a mustache. And so you can either get like the really serious looking characters where like, yes, I'm a warrior and I'm cool looking, or you can just get the people that just look absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I first time with the ones early on made by Capcom, and they were very conventional.
Yeah.
Because you just come across them in the first town and instantly ask you, hey, can I join the party? I'm like, sure, come along. And then like it's about 2 hours later, and then you see the first weird character popping. I was like, oh, this is also what this game is like, huh?
Yeah, and the best thing about the pawn system is that if you are doing a quest and a pawn that you had summoned has already done that quest, they have knowledge of this quest. So they'll be like, oh, master, I've already done this beyond the rift in another world. So I know a shortcut to get to here. And then you click up on the D-pad to tell them to go, and then they'll just run, and you just follow them. And it's just, I think this is an absolutely fantastic system.
So one of the default ones, so one of the early quests that you get is finding a bunch of material for one of the characters in town. And I said, I know where this is. It's like, oh, okay. And they instantly go. So apparently even the default characters of Capcom know the very early quest like really well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just cool. And one thing that I wanted to touch on that is kind of a positive and a negative, if you're done talking about the pawns, are you?
I mean, I will say that the pawns are more useful in this game, and they really are. Like, we kind of mentioned it already, but in a multitude of ways, they will just help you around and even are really effective in combat.
Yep.
So in this sense, you need to have pawns early on, even if they're not the most perfect and not ones in classes that you necessarily would want. It's still good to have them as some sort of backup.
Yep. So one thing I wanted to touch on is that this game is, obviously we talked about how this game just lets you just explore the world, do the quest. Yeah. And in most cases, I find that good. Where I like the game, the fact that the game doesn't hold your hand.
Yeah.
But on a couple of quests, and I won't spoil anything, I missed a couple of things. I actually texted you, Dan, about a quest. One of the main story quests that I didn't understand what to do because the game just... there was an NPC in a room that looked like the NPC that I needed to talk to, but then it turns out I needed to find a secret door somewhere. Oh, but the game never alluded to that. And then there was a side quest where this kid ran off in the distance and he disappeared somewhere. And this is where this quest perfectly shows like how the obtuseness is good and it's also bad. So this kid ran away and his dad was like, oh, try find my son. He went this way. But then I started talking to NPCs in the town and they said, oh, that boy really likes flowers. And them flowers light up at nighttime. So then in my head, the game told me, it was like, oh, if I go to this area at nighttime, it might, have a trail of flowers that lead me to him. And it did. But then sometimes when you find the character that you need to find, the character will either say, I need to be escorted home, or I'm going to go home on my own. And the way the quest finished, it looked like the character was going to go home by himself. But he never did. I had to escort him home. So I thought the quest was glitched because the tooltip for the quest was talk to the dad now, tell him that his son is safe. But every time I spoke to him, nothing changed. So I thought the quest was glitched. But then it turned out that I actually need to escort the kid back, even though he said, oh, I'm going back to town now. And I think that's where, I think overall, it being so obtuse is actually a positive for the game in general. But then there's also a couple of times where I think it could have needed a tiny bit more sort of direction, because that just kind of annoyed me.
I do think there are moments where you're just walking around and trying to figure out what you need to do in a specific instance. Like some of the later gathering quests don't really give you a strong indication of where you need to be, and sometimes the pawns are not really helpful. And in those moments I got really frustrated with the games, like hey, I just kind of want to move on from this. But yeah, with escorting, I normally stay around the characters to see what they do, so normally I didn't have much of a problem with that. But I can see that being frustrating. Like, honestly, like, just not knowing where this kid is going to go or what exactly he's going to do, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. And I still think it's an overall positive for the game, but it's still, I don't know, just a couple of moments. And then I think since we haven't beaten this game, we're both going to give it tentative review scores, but they're not going to be official considering we haven't beaten it yet, but we're going to talk about it. And Dan, I know you said you're not a big Framerate guy, but that was one of the main talking points about this game, is that it has an uncapped frame rate.
Yes.
Firstly, it was Dragon's Dogma won't run at 60 FPS, and after Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I've come around to the 30 FPS mode, because the 60 FPS mode on Rebirth was very blurry, and the 30 FPS is like really solid 30 FPS on Rebirth, so I played the majority of that.
Yeah.
And in Dragon's Dogma 2, I'm slightly more into frame rate. I'm no technical wizard, but the frame rate kind of annoyed me, because since it's running at an uncapped frame rate, if you look up at the sky, you know, it's borderline nearly running at 60 FPS. It's really smooth. And then as you pan the camera down, there's more things being rendered. It drops. And I would have much preferred if they just capped it at 30 FPS. Because
that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, because I just, the variance in smoothness to slightly less smooth, it still never really drops below 30 FPS in most cases, but I would have much preferred if it was just 30 FPS. Now, in the future, this might work out in its favor, because if there is a PS5 Pro, then maybe the PS5 Pro will be able to make use of that uncapped frame rate, take it up to 60 FPS, and then, you know, we'll all be very happy. But I still would have preferred if it was 30 FPS. Dan, do you have... I know you said you're not really big into frame rate.
No, I'm not. Yeah. But I will say, for somebody who can really see... I don't really see it very well. So for me, I don't really see differences in frame rate really particularly well. Yeah, that sounds annoying. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say really on that. But yeah, they should have kept everything the same. That's if they can keep it at 30, then do it 30 everywhere. That sounds like the more logical thing to do. Dragon's
Dogma 2, just to sum it all up, neither of us have beaten this game.
No,
but I was hoping that, as you can see, we both love this game.
Yeah,
but I'm still waiting for the wow moment.
That's fair.
Yeah. Where I think it's a very fun game, and I'm having a great time just exploring the world.
Is it telling that we haven't spoken about the story at all?
Yes, it is, Dan, and I think yes. The story in the original as well wasn't much to talk about, and here, basically, you are the Arisen.
That's it.
Yeah. You are the Arisen, you are the chosen person, and there's sort of some political intrigue as you go along. I don't want to talk too spoilery on it, but there's some political intrigue, and you're kind of infiltrating palaces and all this stuff. But there's almost zero memorable characters up until this moment.
Yeah. I think that's my big negative on this game. I hope they would invoke more of a story. Invoke. But no, it's... I have the feeling that the story is not important. It never has been for either of these games.
Yeah.
I sort of don't mind it, because the game is so free when it comes to like exploration anyway. It's like, how much would a story really add in this particular sense?
Yeah, exactly. I personally prefer for most action RPGs to have as little story as possible, especially one that is so exploration heavy, where they just like the world is the character almost.
Oh yeah.
And the stories that you create exploring the world is the story. So that's just my thoughts on. I'm not a story guy. I've always been a gameplay first person, so it actually suits me down to the ground.
For me, it's sort of in the middle. I like a good story if a story is told well. For example, Baldur's Gate 3. I went through that game multiple times over, because of the story being so interesting and good with little details in common with it. But I also like this way, where the story is not important and I could just have my power fantasy where I can just older through a game and just do whatever the frick I like.
Yep.
There's no really an in between for me. I like either end, but having both ends, particularly now that I just finished Rebirth, was kind of nice, to be honest.
Yeah, that actually is that's why I thought I was going to start feeling a bit of like RPG fatigue almost, because I just put like 55 hours into Rebirth. I've now put like 25 plus nearly 30 hours into Dragon's Dogma 2.
Yeah.
But I those 30 hours just flew by. Like absolutely flew by, because so now it's time to give our tentative scores. These are not official scores, as we have not beaten the game. This is just right now.
Yeah.
I will give this game an 8 out of 10. And the reason for that is I'm having a great time. And I think if it gives me that next wow moment, that is what will push it up to a 9. But
that's fair, yeah.
I genuinely don't think there's anything in this game that could happen now that could put it below an 8 for me, personally.
That's fair, yeah.
So Dan,
for me it's like an 8.5.
Yeah.
I'm in a similar wavelength. I think like the highs for me are a bit higher maybe than you, and the lowers are a bit lower.
Yep.
And not on that many lows, but man, for example, I was really bummed by the Trickster, and man, I'm like, is there really not more to this story so far? But other than that, like, I've not been thinking about most of it. I've just been going through the game like at a breakneck pace, even though it still feels like I've not seen everything that's possibly possible in this game.
Yep.
Even after 30 hours, like, there's still invocations I need to try. There are still elements of the map that feel unexplored to me. So right now, I'm just still having a blast, and I think that will last. It's just that the little things that really bum me out do bum me out.
Yeah. That sounds pretty fair. I think Capcom are still continuing this run of just brilliant games since like 20. When did Monster Hunter World come out? Was that 2017?
Yeah, I mean afterwards Rise was also really good.
Yeah, and then well actually I'd say Resident Evil 7 was probably the start of all of this, and then they've just been on a roll. I don't really think they've released a bad game since, and this is another another great game. I think Capcom are on an absolutely amazing run. Dan, any more final thoughts?
No, that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, we did the entire spiel.
Yep. I highly recommend this game anyway, even though it does have issues. I still highly recommend it. So
I think one final question is more of an offside question. Did you think, and this is more, I'm more interested in your personal opinion on this than anything else. Did you want like more proper multiplayer in this?
Yes, I think this game, I don't understand why this game doesn't have multiplayer. Like, it makes absolutely no sense to me, because the systems are there. Like, you are already summoning in other people's characters. And yes, I understand you have to work out different things in the back end. You have to have servers. You have to code it differently. But the game is built on a foundation of having other people's characters in your game. So why not let other people control them characters? Because, like, while I do think the AI is very good, I do, the pawn AI is really good.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, like as I said about that springboard, whenever I initiate that, a pawn runs straight over to me. But think of how cool it would be, Dan, if me and you were playing this game, and you were the thief, and you were like, oh, I need to get on the dragon's back, and I'm like, quick, run to me, I'll throw you up, and then I throw you up. Or, you know, you are one type of mage, and I'm another mage, and you're buffing and healing the party, and I am doing all the crazy high damage magic abilities, or you're dousing them in oil, so then I can use my fire abilities to damage them. I think, like, as I said, I'm still waiting for that wow moment to take it to, like, say, a 9.5 out of 10. But if this was multiplayer and I was doing all of these things with a friend, that's what would take it to the next level.
That's why I'm asking. I thought that would be a fair assumption to make.
Yeah.
To me, I don't necessarily miss it because of how well the AI of the pawns are, but I get it.
Yeah. Okay, that's our review in progress, tentative review, 25 plus hours of Dragon's Dogma 2. We appreciate everybody sitting here and listening to us ramble about this game. It is very good despite our issues. Yeah. So we might have some guides out for it. I'm not sure. I think I have an idea for a guide or two. We will link them somewhere. Don't forget to subscribe. I mean, you know, if you're going to subscribe, I don't think me saying subscribe is going to change your mind. So I hope you all enjoyed. Dan, thank you very much for your
No
time
worries,
and talking about, and we'll see you all on the next video. Goodbye.
Bye bye.